You're stuck at home in quarantine. It's 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Hey everybody, hope you are all doing well on this hot Friday. Happy Friday, happy weekend, and happy Juneteenth. Hope everybody is doing well. I never heard of Juneteenth until this past couple of weeks. I think that's true of a lot of people, Tom Kelly. So Juneteenth marks the end of slavery in the United States. And the Emancipation Proclamation, of course, went into effect on January 1st, 1863. But because things often move slowly in terms of racial progress, and because the Civil War was still raging on, it wasn't until 2.5 years later that the final region in the United States actually achieved freedom under the Emancipation Proclamation from slavery, and that happened in Galveston, Texas, on June 19th, 1865. And so here we are, celebrating Juneteenth. I am excited that Juneteenth has taken off in this sort of national moment of reckoning with our history. And as I was reflecting today on Juneteenth, I was thinking a lot about when I was a principal. Every year I'd have a community meeting, which were like our whole school assemblies. We do them one grade at a time. And I would teach kids about a famous speech by Frederick Douglass. So in 1852, Frederick Douglass was asked to give a speech in Rochester, New York to commemorate Independence Day on the 4th of July. And he gave this great speech. I recommend that you go and read it. Or there's actually a great reading of it by James Earl Jones that you can find on YouTube. But the speech is titled, "What to a Slave is the 4th of July?" And in the speech, he speaks to this contradiction of celebrating, liberation and independence in a country where a whole class of people were literally enslaved at the time. And it's a really powerful speech, but when I taught it alongside Colin Kaepernick and his protests, and because I feel like the speech really brings up these ideas of patriotism and what it means to be proud of your country at the same time as knowing that that country has done and continues to do things that are oppressive and do serious harm to groups of people, right? And how do you hold those two things side by side? And for me, I think that's what Juneteenth is all about. It tells a second story in addition to July 4th, and it's an explicit recognition that we have a second Independence Day, a second day of freedom. And one of the conclusions in reflecting on this speech and Colin Kaepernick and the things that are going on in the world right now, one of the reflections that I've had is, and conclusions just about patriotism, is that I think that moral patriotism really requires acknowledging and reflecting on the many stories that we have in our country. And Juneteenth makes space for another story. And I think too that I'm pretty sure everybody in this chat is a white person, that we as white people, grew up and were taught a certain story. And we were taught about July 4th, but to your point, Tom, we're not taught about Juneteenth. And why was that, right? And I think it's important, if we are going to be patriots, and if we do want to be inclusive and accepting of everybody, that we celebrate not only our own story, but also the story of others that we live with in our communities, right? And if we don't celebrate those stories, then I think we're just perpetuating a system of racism and white supremacy that has weaved itself throughout all of our society. So Juneteenth allows us to, I think, reflect on another story that is as much a part of our story as July 4th. And that's an important point for me, that, if you're American, if you're patriotic, that Juneteenth is as important a part of our story as July 4th is. And as we celebrate Juneteenth, there continue to be contradictions, right? Just like Frederick Douglass, when he was talking about the 4th of July, was talking about the contradictions between celebrating independence and being enslaved. here today on Juneteenth, we're celebrating the ending of the institution of slavery in 1865. But one of the reasons that there is so much protest and demonstration in this country right now, and sort of national recognition, is that there is not, equality between races in our country. And so on Juneteenth, we have this opportunity to both celebrate the emancipation and the abolishment of slavery of almost over 150 years ago, but we also need to reflect and realize that that does not mean that we're all done and everything is equal and free. And so I think I'll get to the cocktail in a moment. I think the last part of the speech from Frederick Douglass that really resonates with me today is, this was in 1852. This was before the Emancipation Proclamation. He was an abolitionist. He was a former slave. And he said, "The conscience of the nation must be roused." The conscience of the nation must be roused. And that really resonates with me right now, because I'm hoping that in these weeks since the murder of George Floyd, that the conscience of our nation has been roused. And there's been so much, it has felt like a turning point, right? It has felt like our conscience has been roused, that we have been woken up, that more people are talking about these issues, that more people are recognizing that there are issues. People are recognizing that the issues are more pervasive than they realized. People realize that people are having very different experiences than themselves when they are interacting with the police or interacting with other people of authority, or applying for a home loan, right? The whole list of things that is just different for white people than it is for people of color. So it's my hope that this rousing of our nation's conscience is lasting, and that this truly is a turning point. But those are the things that I'm thinking about on Juneteenth today, and I hope that we are able to use this as a turning point. And the symbolic gestures are great, and I think they're important. We should take down the Civil War, the Confederate statues. We should commemorate Juneteenth. We should do all of these symbolic things. That's all important, but I hope too that it moves beyond the symbolic gestures, and that we get some real legislation out of Congress, and more importantly on the state and city levels across the country. So happy Juneteenth to all of you. Some of the things I'm thinking about, I don't get to, it was professionally very rewarding and interesting being a principal and serving a community that was just about all people of color, and being able to engage in these and look inward really regularly and think about my own biases and engage with these topics frequently. And that's something that I, in my current role, that I'm not based at a school or working as directly with students, just don't have as much of an opportunity to do. But I encourage you all to do that. And so now we're turning our way to the cocktail portion of our programming. Really excited. Over the past 10 days, we have been counting down from number 10 to number 1, Ryan Kelly's top 10 cocktails of all time. There's been it was a heated competition. Our top 3 were rounded out by the Old Fashioned 2 nights ago, by the Oaxaca Old Fashioned yesterday, and we're going to return to my friend Rye for the number 1 cocktail of all time, which is the Boulevardier. The Boulevardier. This is a classic cocktail. It comes by way of Paris in the 1920s, invented by an American expat in Paris at Harry's American Bar in Paris. And he was it's named after a sort of literary magazine of the time akin to our current day New Yorker, which was called the Boulevardier. And I love it. It's close to a Negroni in that it uses sweet vermouth and Campari, but then it also brings in the spirit of the Rittenhouse rye, which instead of gin and rye is, I think, probably my favorite spirit. It's the spirit that I go to and the drinks that I like the most often. If I'm looking at a cocktail menu at a bar I haven't been to and trying to choose what I want to drink, I tend to drift to the rye drinks first. And I think this just sort of takes the Negroni to the next level by introducing a better spirit. We play with the ratios a little bit. So the Negroni is 1 to 1 to 1, and here we bump up the rye, and I like to do a 2 to 1 to 1 ratio with just a little bit heftier on the rye. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to do 2 ounces of my house rye, the Rittenhouse. Remember, this is bottled in bond. This means it's aged at least 4 years. It's bottled at 100 proof. And it is just like delicious. It's spicy. The prices have been, when I was first turned on to Rittenhouse, I don't know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it was sneaky and a little bit cheap. It was like, you can get a bottle for like $19, $20. People didn't really know about it yet, but the prices have been steadily creeping up over the past 8 years. It's still not like an expensive bottle, right? It's still, I think, like if I go to Total Wine, I can get it for $24 or so, which continues to be a steal because it is, especially for cocktails, I rarely drink it straight, but especially in cocktails, it is the way to go. It is good. It has a little bit of that extra alcohol. It has that spicy character that just works really well in cocktails and pushes through. For vermouth today, like I did on my Negroni the other day, I'm using the Antica formula, Carpano Antica, which is this really great, really sort of deep, intense, sweet vermouth with a lot of just, really like earthy, and I almost think of like umami. It's like it's not salty, but sort of that like soy sauce quality of that like deep, rich flavor profile. It doesn't taste like soy sauce, don't get confused by that, but that is what I think about that. And next up, we are going to add in our ice. And let's chill and dilute. Thank you, Mr. Abramson, for the stirring tunes. And finally, we have our garnish. I like just a nice wide swath of orange zest, just like that. A nice orange twist. Express it over the top. Rub it around the sides. Drop it in. And here we have Ryan Kelly's #1 cocktail, my favorite, the great, the Boulevardier. Cheers. On the nose, you get obviously the orange, but then you get, I feel like, a little bit of the spiciness from the rye, and then the bitterness, that grapefruit quality of the Campari comes through a little bit too. Such a good cocktail, such a great way to celebrate a Friday. I said this when I made the Negroni with the Carpano Antica sweet vermouth, but it holds up to the other ingredients because it has that intense richness flavor to it, and works just really well in this cocktail because it has a lot to hold up to, right? You've got this spicy high proof rye, and then you've got the the Campari just wants to dominate whatever it's in. But that just like brings that sort of that mouthfeel and that rich underpinning of the rest of the drink that balances it out really nicely. Like I said, I think the 2 to 1 to 1 is perfect on this. I think that the sweet vermouth and the Campari still hold up to the greater amount of rye, and this is really nice. Cheers. So you might be asking yourself, all right, we just did our top 10, we did the full countdown, we got to number 1. What's next? Well, turns out that my cohabitator and wife, Helen Williams, has expressed interest in doing Helen Williams' top 10 cocktails. So in the coming days, she will be joining me as co-host. She's committing to be here each and every night to count down Helen's top 10 cocktails. She did a brainstorm list, and there's actually only one overlap between my top 10 and her top 10, which is really interesting. I can't say I'm surprised, but it's interesting. And so anyway, we will kick that off and get going with that mañana. But otherwise, I hope everybody has a great Friday night. I have got some ribs on the smoker, which I'm going to pull in a second. We have Helen's family coming over for Father's Day in a little bit. We're also going to spend about a half hour from 6 to 6:30 in our little town center, town square, doing a stand for solidarity for Black Lives Matter and Juneteenth. It's just going to be like a nice peaceful line the sidewalk sort of thing. And so we have a busy evening going on today. So I hope everybody else has a good evening. Glad to see the excitement around Helen's appearance from Tom. And I will see you all very soon.
5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Cheers, everybody.